First, thank you all for coming. It's groups like this that are going to save this country, and I mean that. I want to thank all of the people who organized this in particular, and I want to introduce, Sherry just stood up a minute ago from the Rockridge Institute, and Eric Haas, who's here as well. This stuff doesn't get done by one person, as you know. It takes a lot of people. I wanted to address a number of things, and I'll come back to them. I'm not going to start, but I want to just tell you, I want to know why the Democrats wimp out. And I want to talk about my understanding of it so far. I want to get to that. We'll take a few minutes to get to it, but I want to get there because it is absolutely crucial that we have a Democratic Party that doesn't wimp out. I also want to start a little bit by talking about what I do when I'm not thinking about politics. I work in cognitive science and neuroscience and linguistics. That's what I do over at Berkeley. And one of the great advances in neuroscience, an amazing advance, occurred in 1996 in Parma, Italy, known for Parmesan cheese and prosciutto di Parma and all of those good things, about 2 miles away from the heart of downtown Parma, in the neuroscience lab. And what they discovered, they were studying macaque monkeys, and they found out something remarkable. They were studying they had trained monkeys to do certain things, and they had probes in the monkeys' brains to find out exactly what part of the premotor cortex, which choreographs actions, was happening when the monkeys pressed bars and twisted peanuts and, grasped bananas and peeled them and stuff like that. And they could do this, they could check it out neuron by neuron, and this amazing technique for doing this. And as they were doing it, one day, the person running the experiment took a break for lunch, and there was a pile of bananas out in the hall for the monkeys, and he decided he wanted a banana after lunch. He came in, he peeled the banana, started eating it, and all of a sudden he heard clicking from the machine that was hooked up to the monkey to see what the when the monkey was peeling the banana. And he said, well, wait a minute, I'm peeling it, not the monkey. I'm not hooked up to the machine. What's going on here? And they discovered something remarkable. There are in certain connections between the premotor cortex and the parietal cortex, which does visual and other sensory integration, neurons that fire when either you perform an action or you see someone else perform the same action. There's a quote, they're called mirror neurons, M-I-R-R-O-R. But there's more than that, because it's that allows you to predict what other people are going to do. And there's more than that, because there are connections between that part of the brain and the emotional regions. And it turns out that in the emotional regions, those are connected to what you're doing. That is, when you're happy, you smile and your muscles change. When you're sad, your muscles droop, and so on. We've known that for some time. The person who's most responsible for it lives probably within a mile of here, Paul Ekman. And he's the world's expert on the physiology of emotions. Discovered this back in the 50s and has worked on it ever since. And what's happening, what that means is our capacity for empathy is biologically built in. And since then, all of this has been found for human beings as well. In addition to that, one of the most remarkable findings, which occurred only a few months ago down at UCLA, was a discovery that the mirror neurons fire more, not just when you're mirroring, but when you're cooperating with someone else. When you're doing a joint action. We are biologically set up to care about other people and cooperate with them, in addition to controlling our environment and worrying about control and achieving our purposes and stuff like that. That is a crucial thing to know. And I want to get to it because that the difference between worrying about self-interest and understanding everything in terms of it, which a lot of people now have been doing for a long time, and understanding empathy as the center of what holds us together is absolutely crucial. This is biological. Okay? Right now I'm doing a book on all this stuff. So I just wanted to mention it. What I found when I first started back in right after the 1994 election, I asked the following question, which was, why are these conservatives in their contract with America, why do they have these positions that fit together? Why would the same people who are against abortion for the flat tax, what do they have to do with each other? What does the flat tax have to do with owning guns? What does owning guns have to do with being against environmental regulations? I just didn't get it. I thought these were very weird people. And what does all of that have to do with tort reform? Tort reform. I didn't understand what they had to do with each other. And I said, gee, these are strange. And what was even worse about this was, this is my field of study. I'm in cognitive science. I study categorization. And I said, I didn't get it. So I asked myself, well, what if I have the opposite views on all of these? How do my views fit together? Couldn't answer it. That's embarrassing for somebody who's a professor at Berkeley and studies this stuff. So I went and I started, I took it as a cognitive science problem. And I said, okay, let's look at, what would you do? You would look at how people talk about these things, reason about them, look at the language they use, look at the arguments they use in general. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me until I started looking at the family values literature. And then I realized one of my students had figured it out before me. It was a student who noticed that we have a metaphor of the nation as family. And it turns out we have two opposite versions of the family. And what I did was I took all these facts that I gathered about progressives and conservatives, worked backwards, and out popped a strict father and nurturing parent family, and you know which is which. And then what I discovered, when you actually look at the metaphors, they map them directly onto conservative values and progressive values, because we understand the nation as a family in general. And by the way, that's why we have founding fathers. Every 7-year-old knows that George Washington is the father of his country, and they don't say, what? Why? They get it. We send our sons and daughters to war, even if they're not our sons and daughters. Now, and we have homeland security. Right? And it's not just here, Mother Russia, Mother India, the fatherland, it's around the world. Now, one of the most remarkable things when you see this is you see what brings all these things together. And you can see it in James Dobson. Focus on the Family is the principal outlet for educating and raising children in this country. They have a huge enterprise, an enterprise of something like $250 million a year in child rearing, right? They have their own zip code, their own freeway entrance, okay? I mean, they're on more radio stations and in more newspapers than anybody else. That's Dobson, Focus on the Family, raising kids to be conservatives. And what does he say? He says the following: you need a strict father. Why? Because somebody's got to protect the family and mommy can't do it. You need a strict father. Why? Because somebody's got to win those competitions out there to support the family, and mommy can't do it. You need a strict father because kids are born bad, in the sense of they don't know right from wrong, they just do what feels good. You got to teach them right from wrong. There's an absolute right and absolute wrong, and there's only one way to do it: punishing them when they do wrong. And the punishment, he says, has to be painful, so that they will learn to avoid it and do right, not wrong. He says that's the only way to build children who will be moral, who will follow God's commandments. That's straight out of Dobson. But it turns out, when you read the literature on this, he's one of the more liberal people, because he believes that you should never beat a child under the age of 15 months. The other guys say from birth. This is a punitive way of raising children, and it says something else. It says the way that they get internal discipline, to discipline themselves, is through external physical discipline, but there's a secondary effect, which is wonderful. The wonderful secondary effect is that in America, where you have a free market, they can go out in the free market and be disciplined and become prosperous. And if they're not prosperous, what does that mean? It means they're not disciplined enough. And if they're not disciplined, they can't be moral, so they deserve their poverty. Right? What it says is you should never give anybody something they don't earn, because that will take away their discipline, which is the capacity for morality and the capacity to earn money. So that is the reasoning behind it. And this reasoning goes directly into all conservative reasoning. What it says about what the so-called free market is, it says it's like the free market is a metaphorical strict father. Let the market decide. The market will reward and the market will punish. It will reward the disciplined people and punish the non-disciplined people, and that's good. And we need competition. You know, it's very clear in the writing. Competition is important because there's always going to be winners, there's always going to be losers. The winners are the people who are the disciplined people, and they're the moral people, and they should be winners. What lies behind conservatism is that view. That's why they talk about individual responsibility, not social responsibility. When they talk about responsibility, it's individual responsibility. In fundamentalist Christianity, as opposed to nurturing Christianity, of which there is the majority of this country, in fundamentalist Christianity, God is a strict father. What does God say? God says, you follow my commandments, you go to heaven, not, you go to hell. Well, I'll give you a second chance. Now, you follow my commandments, you go to heaven, if not, you go to hell. It's a punitive view of God. It's God as strict father. That's what happens there. That's the market as strict father. And in terms of national sovereignty, it's America as the strict father. America knows right from wrong. It is sovereign. It is the most powerful country because it should be, because it's the most moral country. Other countries should do what we say, period. Right? That's what you're getting now. You're getting strict father morality in every area of policy. And in addition to that, you're getting it in governing itself. That is one of the things that distinguishes, let's say, this administration from many previous ones, is that in this administration, Bush is the decider, and you don't cross him. He rewards and he punishes, and he's in charge, no matter what the Constitution says. That's what's behind this. And it is utterly frightening, and it is the opposite of what this democracy is about. This country was based on principles of empathy and responsibility. As was said here, you care about each other, you take responsibility for yourself and others, and you do. And in order to do that, you've got to be practical and strong, just as Howard Dean was saying. It ain't easy to care about people and carry it out. There's nothing easy about it. You've got to be strong to do it. And that sense of strength is not being conveyed by the Democratic Party today. It's something that they don't get. And it's important that they learn to get it. Now, and responsibility is part of that. Fiscal responsibility is only one part of responsibility. Now, what values come out of empathy and responsibility? What is the role of government? And what are the values in general? Well, you heard of it right there. If you are a nurturing parent, what does that mean? You care about your kids, empathy, you take care of them, responsibility, and you teach them to be the same way. It's the opposite of indulgence. You raise your kids to care about other people. You raise your kids to be responsible for themselves and others. Right? And you raise them to be strong. Very important. That's what it means to nurture a child. And there's nothing easy about it. Anybody in this room who's had kids knows that. Now, what does it mean for our values? Straightforward. It says if you care about your kids, you're going to protect them, you're going to empower them. What does that mean? You're going to care about them means they have to be treated fairly and treat others fairly. They have to be free. They have to have opportunity. To have opportunity, they have to be has to be general prosperity. They live in a community. They're not by themselves. They have to cooperate. For cooperation, you need trust, and for trust, you need openness and honesty. Very simple. Those are the values. And you have them, and you know them. And it doesn't take long to express it. What is the role of government? Very simple. Protection, empowerment. What is protection? It's not just military or police protection or the fire department. It's also disaster protection, and it's environmental protection, it's worker protection, it's consumer protection, it's safety nets. It's all of those things, and it should be health care. That's protection. What is empowerment? Think about what the government does. You have roads. You want to go drive somewhere, you don't have to build the road to get there. It's built for you. You have communications through satellites, paid for by satellite by the government, send up there. You have the internet, which came from the ARPANET, which was developed by the government. You have a education system, a system of public education, which allows people to get jobs, and not just get jobs, but to be educated people, to be more than uneducated people, to have something to aspire to and to understand the world and to connect with it. You have a banking system supported by the government, upheld by it. You have a stock market that functions because you have something like the SEC and other rules and regulations run by the government. You have a court system for contracts, which is 90% corporate law, run by the government. That is, the government empowers business. Now, who uses all of this empowerment more? You as an individual or corporation?
Corporation.
Right. I can drive my car on the highway, they have fleets of trucks, right? I get a bank loan for my mortgage, they get a bank loan to buy other companies, right? I hope I don't have to go to court, except maybe for an occasional traffic ticket, which I hope I don't have to do. But they go to court regularly in contract disputes constantly. Okay? Corporations make their money through empowerment by the public, by public funding. That is, and nobody makes serious money in this country without it. Okay? That is an important truth. What is a subsidy for a company? For, let's say, oil companies or agribusiness. A subsidy is a transfer of wealth to the wealthy. It's a transfer of wealth to investors. So the oil industry said, we take risks. We don't know if the gusher is going to come in, so we're going to need a subsidy to make sure our investors invest in oil and get a return. Is this equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? It's outcome. It means we want the public to pay the investors their profits to guarantee it. That's what subsidies are in agribusiness, in oil, and in other areas. That's what it means to have a subsidy. Right? This is an important thing to understand, and it's not talked about. There are a lot of things not talked about. One of the things that's not talked about is the fact that we have a low-wage trap in this country. The way that our economy is set up, there are two kinds of workers in corporations. There are the resources. Let me just move on from that. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to ask a question of you. First, what is the generalization covering Blackwater and SCHIP? Why are they the same issue? S-CHIP is the Children's Health Initiative.
Privatization.
Why are they? They both have to do with the question of privatization of government functions. That is, will companies, insurance companies on the one hand and private operators on the other, will they be able to take over government functions and charge you through the nose for them? And not only that, they will govern you with no accountability. Because when you lose regulation by the government, what happens? It's not that you lose government, it's that government is transferred to corporations, but the corporation's job isn't to take care of you or protect you, it's to make money. So you don't lose government, you lose accountability. And that is exactly what's happened. There was a story, the third generalization, a story last Friday in the New York Times that says that the FDA no longer has the staff to even begin to do food safety. Right? What is going on? It's the same thing as S-CHIP and Blackwater. You take away from the government the capability to do what the military has to do, the capability to do health care. You take away the capability for safety. What happens? It has to be privatized. You pay through the nose and you're not protected and there's no accountability. Right? That is an issue not discussed. It is one of the principal issues right now in this country. No one is talking about it, and there's a reason why. And the reason has to do with a mode of thought, which I'll call neoliberal thought. So let me tell you a bit about it. And let me tell you first one more thing. What we found out when you look at nurturant and strict morality is that we all have both in our brains. And we have it because we have empathy and we have an issue of control, but we apply them in different areas. So you may be, completely nurturant in your public life, but when you go to see the movies, you can actually see a Schwarzenegger movie and understand it. And you wouldn't understand it if you didn't have that model in your brain. Not only that, there are all sorts of people who are militants. What is a militant? Someone who has strict thought and means to a nurturant end. Right? We have them, probably some in the room. Right? Important to understand that they're both there, they're both in your brain, and they're mutually exclusive. What does this mean? It means that the people who are so-called in the middle are mixtures of all sorts of this. I mean, think of the following moderates. Right? Now, Giuliani is called a moderate. Right? You got moderate Giuliani and moderate Joe Lieberman. Right? Or, whatever. The point is, if you really look at people, there are a lot of people who are what I call bi-conceptual. They have both models and different parts of their lives with all kinds of compositions. There is no linear scale that's left to right. And the reason that's important is that the Democrats believe that there is, and that they believe, therefore, if they move to the right, they'll get more votes. It's wrong. If they move to the right, they give up their moral values. And they not only alienate their base, they help the other side, and they look like they have no values because they have no values. Right? Whereas, the way to do it is the way Sherrod Brown did it in Ohio. He understood this. Sherrod Brown went in Ohio, and he did not depart from his values. He talked to people where they shared them. Because there are a lot of people who call themselves conservatives who have lots of progressive values, who care about the environment. They just don't call it the environment. They just say they love the land. But they care about it as much as any environmentalist. And the same thing, there are plenty of people there who are progressive Christians, not fundamentalist Christians. And there are plenty of folks there who are progressive business people who are honest, would never ever dream of harming the public or screwing their workers. Right? This is important to understand, that you can talk to conservatives where they agree with you already, and that's why Sherrod Brown won, without moving to the right. The Democratic Party needs to understand this, crucially. Now, why don't they? There's, in the Democratic Party, there's a mode of thought that comes out of the Enlightenment. One of the problems is many of our leaders went to college. And what you learn if you take a political science course in college is the following thing. You learn that this country is based on the Enlightenment, and the Enlightenment, we had wonderful values about equality, fraternity, liberté, etc. from the French, but all sorts of wonderful things that came into our Constitution. But the environment, the Enlightenment had a false theory of mind. We know now from cognitive science that this is true. Why is it true? The Enlightenment thinkers believed that all thought was conscious. 98% of it is not conscious. They believed that it was literal, would fit the world. It turns out a lot of it is frames and metaphors. It doesn't. They believed that it was unemotional. Turns out you can't reason without emotion. One of the great, another discovery in the last 10 years in neuroscience is if somebody gets a stroke or an injury where they can't have emotion, that's it. They can't be rational. Okay? They believe that it's disembodied, and moreover, the big thing is they assume that reason has a function to serve your self-interest. And that's what the market is about. Adam Smith, if everybody serves their self-interest, the self-interest of all will be maximized magically by the invisible hand, and that's moral and natural, supposedly. But the assumption is broader than that. It's there in the rational actor model, which defines our current view of what foreign policy is, where you have states are people who are rational actors, and that means in the actual models that are used, they're game theoretical models, they are about self-interest computed from some beginning point to an ending point, which means that history doesn't count because it's before the beginning point, and to evaluate cost-benefit analysis, there has to be a beginning point and an ending point. So we know, for example, in Iraq, the ending point was mission accomplished, right? Over. That kind of thinking occurs in economics, and it turns out to be utterly false about the way people think. I've done an analysis of the metaphorical structure of that. It's entirely metaphorical. It has very weird entailments. But Danny Kahneman, who's one of my colleagues in cognitive science, won a Nobel Prize by showing it's wrong. Now, why does this matter? It turns out it matters that this form of rationality is used in policy decisions by the Democrats and the way that they think about it. And it has the following consequences. That one, they look at the facts and figures for each issue, and they try to argue just facts and figures. They don't look at the moral principles behind it or the empathy. And if you do that, what are the facts and figures about S-chip? What are the facts and figures about Blackwater? What are the facts and figures about the FDA? They don't generalize. You can't look at the values across them if you think that way. Now, if you think that way also, there's a part of it that says maximize that, get as much as you can, and try to get an empathy by looking at group self-interest for certain interest groups. So let's say we're going to have a program for African Americans in the inner city. We're going to have another program for people in labor. We're going to have another program for poor people. We're going to have another program for this. And we're going to help their interests, their self-interests. That's a thought. When you, as soon as you say that, you've forgotten about empathy and responsibility and community. The moral message doesn't come out. And if those moral values are not said, they're not going to be in the brains of the public. The other guys generalize. They know that they state general principles about free markets and strong defense and all of those things that go across issues. We don't. And as long as we do that, we give away to the other side, always, and we will wimp out on our values because we're not even stating them, much less being strong about them. That is one of the major problems that faces the Democratic Party right now. They're thinking in a way that is self-destructive. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lakoff. We are going to take about 15 to 20 minutes of questions. Is one of the most important pressure points along that spectrum. However, to grow their movement, our movement, and to change and affect the public debate on so many questions, important questions of our time, especially at Rock, the Rockridge Institute needs your support. Please go to rockridgeinstitute.org and do 4 things. Number 1, sign up. Okay. Number 2, download Thinking Points, this book. George, correct me if I'm wrong?
You can download it for free or buy it for $10 or less on the internet. But I prefer that you go to a local bookstore and spend the whole $10.
Read the work on the rockridgeinstitute.org website and join Rockridge Nation, which is the Rockridge Institute's blog. So let me make that very brief again. Sign up is probably the most important thing. If you're going to stay in constant contact with Professor Lakoff and the fellows at the Rockridge Institute, you need to sign up for their email newsletter, okay? The information is on this piece of paper that many of you have on your seats right now. Make sure you go home and do that. Make sure you fill out the clipboards that Sherry Reason from the Rockridge Institute and Eric Haas are actually going to start passing around right now. And most importantly, I mentioned 4 things: sign up, download, read the Rockridge Institute work, join the Rockridge Nation, and if we're going to build progressive infrastructure in this country, we need to think long and hard about who we're donating our money to. Okay? Please. Think about that. When you get a pitch from a candidate or an organization, ask yourself, what are their progressive values? Okay? The Rockridge Institute is an organization that needs your financial support.
I think every time you get a notice from the DCCC or the DFCC, you should just transfer yourself right on over to the Rockridge Institute.
Thank you, Vicki. I just wanted to make that brief pitch. I don't think I need to say anything more because Vicki Cosgrove put a huge exclamation point on it. Thank you. Sherry, anything to add?
Well, I just want to say, I have this fantasy that we are going to have 1,000 people by next year who are making some small, regular contribution to Rockridge. Right now, there are fewer than 100 people doing that. $5 a month to $200 a month. We don't care what it is, but those small, regular contributions are enormously important. So if you can think about doing that, and if then when you read something that excites you, you can pass it along to a friend and suggest they do the same thing, we can build this out and amplify our voice, which is the critical thing to do. So I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sherry. We're moving into questions and answers now.
All right. One last thing. The Rockridge Nation website takes questions, and we try to answer them. One of the most important functions of this website is to have it be seriously two-way, because the questions we get force us to think seriously about things that bother people, and we take them very, very seriously. So join up. It costs nothing. We're there for you. And send in your questions and comments on other people's questions. Yes.
Are you trying to replace or put in the Democratic side the Grover Norquist?
Can you project your voice and speak without a microphone?
No, I got a problem with that.
Okay.
All right.
So when you guys ask
I'll
questions,
answer. I'll repeat. Were we trying to replace Grover Norquist? If only we could. Grover Norquist is a very wealthy man who is a venture capitalist and a major fundraiser, which is what allowed him to do what he does. We know exactly what he does because one of my graduate students was invited to come and sit in on his Wednesday morning meetings for 3 months. And chapter 3 of his dissertation tells exactly what happens in those things.
Who is that?
This is Tom Medveds. He just went on, he's at Cornell right now in a postdoc. He's just finished his dissertation. And I used to get very interesting Wednesday night calls. But I'll tell you just what Norquist does. He invites between 80 and 200 conservative leaders, and everybody who comes has to take the pledge, which is to cut taxes and be against abortion and all of those things. But in addition to that, the meeting is first a schmooze. They serve bagels and coffee and all those nice things, and people get to talk and meet and arrange golf dates and whatever. And then they do a show and tell. Everybody gets 3 minutes to go up and say what they're doing. Okay? Then he arranges a debate. He takes some issues where conservatives disagree, and he gets the best debaters they can, and they debate openly with everybody asking any question they want. And if there's a consensus, and it's clear, he announces the consensus, and then everybody supports the consensus. And he makes sure that nobody gets left out, so that you know that if you didn't win this week, you're going to win next week or the week after, so that they're balanced. And then, when that consensus is done, let's say by noon, it starts at 9, goes to 12, by 5 o'clock that night, they have talking points all over the country, with everybody saying the same thing, because they have a booking agency which takes the talking points, sends them out to all their speakers, then matches the speakers with every radio and TV station that they've got around there, and between 9 in the morning and 5 at night, they blanket the country. Okay? We don't have the money to do that. We are a poor organization. They're a wealthy organization. And the conservatives on their think tanks, they spend $400 million a year. Okay? We don't do that. Even though we have plenty of people who are wealthy enough on the progressive side to be able to do it, they don't know how. Other questions? Yes?
Right, so tied into that a bit, I'll ask the question, I'll give you a very short background to why I'm asking the question. So the question is, for the Democratic Party as a party to succeed, does it actually have to adopt the strict father approach rather than the nurturing parent one? So here's why I ask. It's not new that the Democratic Party is disorganized. Right? So it's been an old thing. So I worked for Congress in the House of Representatives for 7 years, between 87 and 94, and went through.
I'm sorry, please
Yeah.
stand up and project your voice.
Right. Okay. So the question. Thanks.
But please be brief as well.
Yeah. Right. So the question is, for the Democratic Party to succeed, does it actually have to adopt the strict father rather than the nurturing one? And has that been one of the problems? So when Howard Dean said that, of course, the balanced budget was passed without a single Republican vote, it wasn't accidental. Right? So to me, I think the Republicans have been extremely good at adopting that, and we haven't. So do we have to adopt it, or is there some other way to succeed?
We don't. But you do have to do the following thing. Look, if you're a responsible parent, you set limits. And you tell your kids when they have to be home and what's safe and not safe, and what they have to do to help their parents and to help their family and so on. And you make it absolutely clear. And if they don't do it, you find ways to not beat the shit out of them, but instead find appropriate ways to have them do something to help. There are plenty of ways to do this within the party, namely who gets what chairmanships, things like that. There are all kinds of ways that the speaker has. And right now we have a speaker who is under fire. Right? She has 2 competitors who would rather be speaker, who are in the leadership, Rahm Emanuel and Steny Hoyer, who have other views. We have one is a blue dog, one is a let's call them a neoliberal, who has that other way of thinking, and he's a DLC type. And and her view is she accepts the idea that you have to move to the right. And they all believe in this left to right stuff, you've got to move to the right. And that's wrong. Now, it turns out that if you start looking at the blue dogs who got elected, and you talk to them, and you ask, why are you a Democrat? They will give you a progressive answer. They will tell you what's in their heart of hearts about the issues they care about. They'll tell you about poor people, about people not having health care, Steny Hoyer is pushing through S-chip, etc. That is, they are progressive on many issues, but not all. They are bi-conceptual, but largely progressive. The importance is they don't know that. They don't know what it is that makes them Democrats. They don't know exactly where they agree with everybody else, and they don't know that they have to hang together or they're going to help the other side. They don't understand that. They think that in order to get reelected, they have to look like Republicans. That's wrong. They get reelected, they have to talk to their base about where their base agrees with them. And they have to show that they have sincerity, that they're trustworthy, that they're honest, that they have character, and they have strength in whatever they believe, and that they agree with them on a lot of issues. That's the way to get really elected in those districts. And they have to show they care about the people in their district. That's why people vote. People vote on the basis of trust, communication, care, and empathy. And that's what Ronald Reagan projected. People trusted him. And a certain number of people trusted Bush. Now, okay, so anyway, the answer is no, we don't have to do that. We do have to get people to understand you don't move to the right. You have to have people understand why they're Democrats, and you have to have people understand when they're going to help the other side. Yeah. Please.
As an individual, how do I do that?
As an individual, you take part in a lot of things in your community, and you write letters and so on, but you have to express your values, and you have to state the generalizations about all these things. You have to be able to answer the questions that conservatives, if you happen to know any, and I do, but also that you want to be able to write to people in Congress around here that when they are doing what the Democrats have been doing, when they vote to continue just before the summer recess to fund the war for 3 more months, that's a disaster. You let them know clearly, and you let them know why. And you let them know why because they're really helping the other side, period. You let them know why on, when they give in the FISA vote. You let them know that when they give in the Move On case, what they're doing is voting against their own people. Now let me talk a little bit about the Petraeus issue. I know a fair amount about it. I know the guy who made up the ad. I wish he had talked to me first. I would have said the ad should, if you're going to do it, say, General Petraeus, don't betray us.
That would have been much better. Yeah.
Right? That's what I told him. He said, oh, God. But they did it the other way. Their strategy was this. They wanted to get people, they wanted to shock people, and they wanted to get the betrayal theme out there. And they wanted to get that frame out there with the president and his guys in the role of betrayers. And then they wanted to ask the question. And they saw themselves as tossing a softball to Congress. And the softball, they hoped, would be this, that they had a question mark, and then they went through all the reasons why Petraeus was lying. And they went through that, and they had all the facts. If you read the whole ad, not just the top, but the entire ad, it's a very good ad, right? They had it all laid out, and all the Democrats had to do was say, gee, that's an interesting question. Let's find out. They ask all these things. Let's ask those questions. The idiots didn't do that. What they did was they let themselves be swift voted by the same people who did the swift vote ads. Okay? Ari Fleischer got those people, and what they did was use a normal metonymy of the leader for the organization. They said, you're insulting the leader, you're insulting all the troops. It's a trope. They had this trope for the troops. They voted on it. They actually had a vote in the Senate and the Congress of the As a linguist, my heart I don't know whether to sing or cry, but I thought that date should be a date in history called Metonymy Day. That's
That kind of gets to exactly what I'm thinking about this whole issue.
Norm, please stand up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah,
Wait,
no, why? No, I don't need to.
stand up.
Please.
It kind of gets to my core issue with this whole military thing. I don't know if any of you have ever been in the military. I was in the military for 3 years. So, I mean, instead of reframing this whole argument in regards to patriotism, I mean, why aren't we reframing it into terms of IQ? I mean, in essence, I mean, it's stupid. If we let General McClellan run the Union Army the way we're permitting General Petraeus and the rest of the revolving leadership of our current military strategy, we would never have won the Civil War. All right? And in fact, actually, I'd probably be much more satisfied because the South would probably not be a part of the Union right now.
Norm,
But-
move to a question.
But why can't we reframe it in the argument of stupidity? I just...
The answer is a very important answer. If you know the people in Congress, they're actually very intelligent people. They just act stupidly. And the reason they act stupidly, I think, is two reasons. One, they all really do have the idea of empathy and responsibility as a value, but they think it's weak, and they can't say it. They can't come out and say they care about anybody because it sounds weak, whereas interest sounds strong. And as soon as you try to get from interests to empathy, you're not going to do it. And as soon as you take that step, you're halfway to the conservative values. And when you start when you surrender your values, what happens? One, you don't tell people what they are, which means you don't activate them in their brains. You know, on take healthcare, which is another example of this. It's the same issue in healthcare. Michael Moore got it right in Sicko. He said, you know, that what healthcare is, what the health insurance business is about, is the opposite of the market. In the market, you make more money by selling more, delivering more products. In health insurance, you make more money by delivering less products, by denying people care, right? That's what's wrong with all these insurance-based based approaches. And nobody is saying it. They all start out with the insurance-based approach. Now, Barack Obama gets up there and he says, look, we know that the best plan would be single payer, but it's probably not practical. We probably can't get a majority. So let's give in already and start with the insurance-based approach. You're giving away the store. You're going halfway to the other side, and that's where you start your negotiation, and you never let the American people even think about the issue, because you don't bring up the issue. You don't mention the issue. You don't give people a chance to say, yes, they're all denying me care. Right? That's the problem. Yes?
1 second. One question, and then Matt Lockson would like to ask a question, and then we have to move on. No pun intended.
How much of the Democrats' problem is due to them not getting the empathy thing, but them getting huge amounts of money from corporations who don't want them to get the empathy thing?
That's a serious issue. And it's an extremely serious issue because they're always thinking about the next election. And they're always thinking about how much money they have to raise per day. And it's a lot. Barbara Boxer has to raise, what, about $35,000 a day? You know, I mean, it's just incredible how much they have to raise all the time. You know, so one of the major things to do is take corporate money out of elections. It's a huge issue. And you're right.
I'm sorry, everyone. Matt wanted to make, he had a very pointed question he wanted to make sure he asked.
Thanks, Matt.
You have a strict father, nurturing parent. You don't have a role for bad parent. And I mean, I'm wondering, in the Congress, I had a discussion with someone who lobbies members of Congress, and he said, you think the Democrats are weak and they don't have a spine. You don't realize some of these people are bad people. And they just don't have good politics. They're not operating on a principled level. They just, like where they're at. And I'm just wondering how you would incorporate that kind of observation into your framework.
Well, sure. There are many ways to be bad parents. You can be neglectful parents by worrying about yourself more than your family. That's one very bad way to be a parent. You could be not just a strict parent, but an abusive parent, right? And that's what you find in the hard right, right? They're abusive, and you find that also sometimes on the left in terms of the means that are used. So yeah, you find people on both sides of the aisle who are bad in those ways. I mean, it's real. But the thing that gets me is it's not normal. It isn't the norm. Most of the people there are not bad people. You know, they aren't the William Jeffersons, right? You know, you're not going to find the $90,000 in their freezer. Right? Most of them are good people, and it's the good people who are screwing up so badly. That's the problem. If you had all the good people, you know, who understood that they have to stand for their values, that they have to project strength, and it's very important for people to project strength, because unless you talk like you're a strong person and act and vote on bills like you're a strong person, nobody's going to believe you're a strong person. I mean, if you start weaseling like this, nobody's going to believe that you can defend your country if you can't even defend yourself. If you can't even defend your staunchest supporters, like move on, you know, how are you going to defend the country?
Pass your evaluations back to any DFA Meetup member who has a DFA sticker. DFA sticker, pass your evaluations back.
The meeting was extremely nice. It was inspiring. I felt I learned a few things from Dr. Lakoff today, and it kind of resonated with a lot of my core values, which makes it inspiring for me. And that's the reason why I'm here today, and I feel happy to have, listened to the same, and it's brought about, feeling and understanding that there are so many other people who kind of resonate with the same values, so it makes me feel that I'm not alone with this concept.
It was excellent. A lot of food for thought. Mr. Lakoff is very provocative, and he's based on good science, and presents us in a way that we can understand what he's saying, and then go home and think about what he said and try to put that into our political lives and personal lives even. I think he's been doing an excellent job, and the Democratic Party needs to listen to him more in order to get at the values that resonate throughout our entire selves, and not just speak about numbers and facts, but to speak about the values that resonate through our entire being, and that is essentially what the voters are using to decide how they want to vote.
I think it was excellent. I think a lot of people really enjoyed Lakoff, and I think he's given a lot of people excellent points to think about, especially in changing their message and reframing the debate, creating new change in our own party, really.